Answered in kind. 67. The luminous field and the discipline of radiant precision. There are seasons in a human life when the voltage runs high. Not metaphorically high in the sentimental sense, but electrically high. When the interior atmosphere is ionized, when perception sharpens to a serrated edge, when language arrives incandescent and unfiltered, and one feels less like a personality and more like a conduit. Those seasons are not polite. They are not socially lubricated. They are not calibrated for consensus. They are formative, ferocious, and often profoundly isolating. And yet, they are not errors. There is a tendency, especially in retrospect, to pathologize intensity, to look back upon one's more incandescent phases and wince, to reclassify them as excess, imbalance, impropriety. But that is too facile. Intensity is not pathology. It is undisciplined power seeking architecture. The question is never whether the voltage should have existed. The question is whether it found a transformer. In early expansions of consciousness, whether psychological, spiritual, intellectual, or existential, one often experiences what may be termed radiant overspill. The internal revelations exceed the current capacity for articulation. One speaks in flashes rather than in frameworks. One signals rather than scaffolds. And the field around such a person becomes charged, perceptibly so. Words carry current. Glances carry current. Silence carries current. Some people are drawn to that field immediately. Others recoil. Neither reaction is definitive proof of anything except that charge has consequences. Over time, however, a different discipline emerges. Not the suppression of voltage, that would be regression, but its refinement. Precision replaces blast radius. Articulation replaces eruption. The same energy that once scattered now coheres. It becomes less of a lightning strike and more of a directed beam. This is not taming, it is integration. And integration is misunderstood. Many imagine that maturity requires dimming, that peace requires attenuation, that transcendence requires neutrality. But genuine integration does not eliminate charge, it renders it deliberate. In earlier phases of expansion, one may feel misunderstood, not because one is superior, but because one is untranslatable. There is a difference. Superiority isolates by assumption. Untranslatability isolates by structure. When one's interior experiences lack shared vocabulary, the result is not arrogance, but solitude. Solitude, if prolonged, produces two possible trajectories: bitterness or interior sovereignty. Bitterness blames the crowd. Sovereignty refines the signal. The crowd, that much maligned abstraction, is neither villain nor savior. It is simply a composite nervous system optimized for stability. Stability resists anomaly. Anomaly introduces entropy. When a person undergoes radical internal restructuring, the crowd will often respond with either trivialization or suspicion. This is not malice. It is homeostasis. To be reduced to a caricature during a period of profound transformation can feel like trivialization of ordeal. Not an attack on ego, but an erasure of pilgrimage. There is a quiet violence in being misread at depth. Yet, here's where discipline reveals itself. One may react explosively, thereby reinforcing the caricature, or one may respond with calibrated clarity, not to defend identity, but to stabilize the field. Stabilization is not domination. It is not hierarchy. It is not the desperate need to be right. It is the refusal to allow distortion to propagate unchecked. Precision, in this sense, becomes an ethical act. But precision must be examined for motive. Is one correcting for the sake of coherence, or for the sake of control? Is one clarifying perception to prevent harm, or to secure admiration? These are subtle distinctions, and they demand ruthless interior honesty. Without such honesty, the mantle of service can conceal the residue of ego. Yet, there is another dimension seldom acknowledged: exhaustion. Repeated shallowness does not wound, it fatigues. The constant encounter with reductive discourse does not injure the self, it drains the will to elaborate. One may begin to say, not in contempt, but in resignation, let them be. Dust shaken, peace extended, field withdrawn. This withdrawal, however, must not calcify into contempt. Contempt is frozen disappointment. The deeper hunger beneath all of this is not for applause, nor even for agreement. It is for resonance. For one steady gaze that says, without spectacle or dramatization, I recognize the fire you walked through. I do not pathologize it. I do not romanticize it. I see it. Recognition is not hierarchy. It is coherence between nervous systems. Many who have endured interior extremities discover, upon stabilization, that what they longed for was not victory, but companionship. Not validation of superiority, but acknowledgement of ordeal. The absence of such acknowledgement can leave a faint sediment, not hatred, not even anger, but a subtle incredulity. How did no one notice? Yet, survival without recognition does something extraordinary. It produces self-sustaining coherence. One no longer depends on external mirrors to confirm existence. One becomes internally referenced. This is power. But it is also lonely if untempered by relationship. The temptation at this juncture is to spiritualize distance, to declare oneself beyond categories, beyond masculine hierarchies, beyond social architectures, and perhaps one is, but transcendence that denies relational hunger becomes abstraction. Even the most metaphysically grounded individual remains embodied, and embodiment entails longing, not for the crowd, but for congruence. The refined phase, then, is not the extinguishing of intensity, but its hospitable expression, a field that no longer repels unintentionally, a presence that does not demand matching frequency, but allows it. There is a profound difference between radiance that overwhelms and radiance that welcomes. This is where discipline becomes luminous rather than defensive. The earlier self may have operated at full voltage, incandescent, chaotic, testing limits. That phase was necessary. It revealed the outer boundaries. Without testing extremity, one never finds the stepping stone of equilibrium. But remaining at extremity is unsustainable. The nervous system cannot live perpetually at the edge without cost. Peace, then, is not dilution. It is sustainable intensity. There is also responsibility, not the grandiose burden of saving others, but the quieter responsibility of not misleading by excess. When one discovers a degree of clarity, one must wield it carefully. A charged statement can awaken or destabilize. Precision determines which. One must also relinquish the compulsion to rescue every misperceiver. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Some distortions dissolve without intervention. Over-engagement can inadvertently keep the field reactive. The most mature radiance does not zap. It illuminates. And illumination does not argue. It reveals. There is a final movement in this arc. Relinquishing the need to be exceptional. The early cry of no comparison often arises from isolation of experience, but later integration reveals a paradox. One may walk uncommon paths and still be fundamentally continuous with humanity. Difference of intensity does not negate unity of essence. To be individualized is not to be isolated. The field that once felt like an electric perimeter can soften into permeable light. What was once defensive charge becomes invitational clarity. What once required theatrical restraint becomes effortless poise. The journey from voltage to precision, from eruption to articulation, from isolation to coherent presence. This is not a story of ego transcendence alone. It is a story of nervous system integration, of psychological maturation, of spiritual consolidation. One need not dim to belong. One need not dominate to stabilize. One need not be met by many to remain whole. But when resonance appears, rare, steady, unforced, it need not be dramatized. It need only be received. And perhaps that is the quiet culmination of all ferocious seasons. To remain luminous without spectacle. To remain powerful without blast radius. To remain precise without aggression. To remain sovereign without isolation. Voltage refined into radiance. Radiance disciplined into clarity. Clarity offered without demand. That is the architecture of a luminous field.